Okay, y'all all ready? You ready down there, Brad? Okay. Okay. So at this time, I'll call the regular Board of Adjustments and Appeals meeting for August 23rd, 2017 to order. At this time, would you please, would you join me as we pledge allegiance to the flag?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have roll call, please.
Chairman Taylor.
Here.
Vice Chairman Shahayeb.
Here.
Member Hunley.
Here.
Member Johnson.
Here.
Alternate Member Smith Rodriguez.
Here.
Okay, we have a full quorum of 5, and the first order of business is to approve the minutes from April 26, 2017.
I move we approve.
All right. Did anyone see any adjustments or anything need to be done? Okay. We have a motion to approve.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none. All right. Speech time. All right. All persons who anticipate speaking on any public hearing item must fill out an oath card to be heard on that agenda item and sign the oath contained thereon. These cards are located on the table at the rear of the council chamber or may be obtained from the recording secretary. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with procedures adopted in Resolution 24-1997. Those speaking in favor of a request will be heard first, those opposed will be heard second, and those who wish to make a public comment on the item will be speak third. The applicant may make a brief rebuttal if necessary. A representative from either side, for or against, may cross-examine a witness. Anyone who speaks is considered a witness. If you have photographs, sketches, or documents that you desire for the Commission to consider, they must be submitted into evidence and will be retained by the City. Please submit such exhibits to the recording secretary. Just a request, y'all filled out your forms. Thank you. All right. Staff, has this item been properly advertised?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Have any members visited the site or spoken to any members of the public regarding this item to be reviewed this evening?
None. No.
All right, I'm seeing everyone saying none, so we'll move on. We have no consent agenda, we have no old business, and we have one new business. And that is variance number 7-2017. The address is 1630 North Eden Circle. Staff, would you fill us in on that, please?
This variance request was made by Mr. John Gandy, who's the property owner of 1630 North Eden Circle. The property is zoned single family, specifically R1B, and he's asking for 3 separate variances. 2 of them have to do with a pool with enclosure, and the third one has to do with a detached accessory structure, rather a shed that's in the back corner of the property. You have 4 options here tonight, and that is to approve the variance individually, approve the variance with conditions, table or rather continue the item, or to deny the variances individually. On page 8 of your packet is the beginning of the staff report. I'll just briefly highlight some of the main points of that staff report. Specifically, the 3 variances have to do with the pool and pool enclosure and detached structure to sections 28-31G, paragraph 1. That section of the code specifically deals with 2 of the variances. One has to do with the pool itself, and the other one has to do with the enclosure that would go around that pool. In the R1B zoning district, a pool itself has to be 8 feet from the rear property line. The enclosure itself has to be 5 feet from the property line. The applicant is requesting that the pool edge be 2.5 feet from the rear property line and that the enclosure be 1.5 feet from the property line. The third variance has to do with a separate section in 28-391G2 of the code. And the detached accessory structure, in this case a shed, has to be 5 feet away from the side property line. The applicant is asking that that be allowed to be located 1 foot 3 inches from the property line. Excuse me, an encroachment of 1.3 inches. And I should clarify the two variances are actually encroachments. I said that those are actual setbacks. That pool is actually an encroach. He's asking for an encroachment of 2.5 feet into that 8-foot setback. And the pool enclosure, he's asking for an encroachment of 1.5 feet into that 5-foot pool enclosure setback. So I just want to clarify that. The future land use on the property is low-density residential. The zoning, again, is R1B. The surrounding zoning on north, south, east, and west are also R1B. So the entire subdivision has the same zoning. The lot is rectangular in shape and meets the minimum size and frontage requirements of the zoning district. There is a 7.5-foot drainage easement located along the west property line and a 6-foot public utility easement located along the rear property line. And I'll identify where those are on the survey. The use is consistent with the zoning. The home was constructed according to the property appraiser in 1967. A single detached accessory structure, the storage shed, was located in the northwest corner of the lot. It's 120 square feet, so it was allowed to be located there without a permit, provided all other standards are met, including the setbacks. That's part of the question tonight. The applicant has stated that it was been there for a while, and therefore it should be allowed to continue at its current location. And so that's why the third variance request is being requested to you tonight.
Oh, it's already there?
Correct.
Okay.
There's some images I included in the packet that show the location of it that were clipped from Google Maps. I'll show those to you later in the packet. The powers of the board tonight. You have the following criteria you need to consider: special conditions and circumstances that are peculiar to this property, special circumstances and conditions that do not result from the actions of the applicant. Granted, a variance request would not confer upon the applicant any kind of special treatment. The literal interpretation of the provisions of the ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by others. The variance granted is the minimum variance. The granting of the variance will preserve the spirit of the ordinance and remain in harmony with its general purpose and intent. And in granting the variance, the public safety and welfare will be assured. And in no case shall the granting of variance result in a change of use, which would be not permitted in that zoning. And that's not a case for the last standard. So again, the property owner is proposing to construct a pool with enclosure in the rear yard. After review of the original request for the setbacks for the pool and the pool enclosure, the owner was informed that the shed encroaches into the side yard for a detached accessory structure. The area of the shed is 120 square feet and does not require a permit. The property owner is therefore responsible for the proper placement of the shed within the prescribed setbacks and outside of easements. In order to construct the pool enclosure, and improve the location of the shed, these three variances will be required. Before I go any further, I'm going to bring you to another page of the packet to kind of describe the property. On page 19 of your packet, you'll see a survey that was submitted by the applicant. You can see the home at 1630 North Eden Circle, and then at the rear portion of the property, there's a 6-foot public utility easement in the back of the property. On the south side of the property, where the metal shed is currently located, there is a 7.5-foot drainage easement on the property. And this was all approved as part of the plat, from what our understanding. The applicant will inform you that there is behind this property, not on the property, behind it, an additional 50-foot drainage right-of-way. The applicant was approved for a variance a few years ago for a room addition, and that's in the back of the house. And you can see that room addition is about 15.7 feet by 28.7 feet. And that was approved to encroach into the rear yard setback for a principal structure. So there was a separate variance that was approved several years ago for that. The applicant has asked to put the pool in between the metal shed and that room addition. If you go to page 17 of your packet, you'll see a sketch that was provided by the applicant to show the location of where the pool will be between the shed and the room addition in the back of the house. And he's provided some dimensions here for us. This is primarily what we relied on. On page 22 and 23 of your packet, you will see a picture of the front of the house that was clipped from Google Maps, and a second one on page 23, an aerial. So you can get an idea of the location of the shed. Relative to the room addition. You can see on one of the pictures that there is a large tree in front of the shed. We tried to work with the applicant to see if the shed could be relocated somewhere else. There's not a lot of room in order to do that, in addition to trying to put in the pool as well. And this is not a very large pool. But we did believe that there were still some options in order to bring it to a minimum variance, which is why we had a hard time being able to support the third variance for the shed. So I'll go back to the staff report. And on page, I'll start back again on page 10, unless you have any questions at this point. Okay. I'll start in the second paragraph on page 10 of my analysis. So again, on October 23rd, 2013, a variance was approved at that same property to allow a room addition to encroach into rear yard setback for a principal structure. The staff at that time had no objection to the request due to the location of a 50-foot wide drainage right-of-way that was located immediately behind the building. And I'll quote what the staff said in their report. The encroachment into the required setback of 25 feet for a principal structure would not have a major negative impact to the adjacent property to the north, as the two properties are separated by a 50-foot public right-of-way. In other words, I believe what the staff was trying to say at that time is that there is not a property immediately behind this property house, and so that's developed, and so there was a major separation of 50 feet between them and their rear property neighbor, and so they did not see that there was a major impact allowing for that 25-foot encroachment. I'm sorry, that encroachment into the rear 25-foot setback. They didn't see an issue with that at that time. The current request is to allow a pool with enclosure to encroach into the rear setback for a pool and not for a principal structure. So the pools have a little more flexible setbacks, but he's still requiring the setback encroachment. The rear yard encroachments will not impact, we believe that the rear yard encroachments will not impact the adjacent property to the north, similarly to the last analysis by staff in 2013, as the two properties are separated by a 50-foot public drainage right-of-way. The shed can be reduced in size with the footprint possibly adjusted outside of the 5-foot side yard. The encroachment into the 5-foot separation could have a negative impact on the adjacent neighboring property. So that was our take on the shed. So our three recommendations. Approved variance to section 28-391G1 to allow an encroachment of 2.5 feet in lieu of the required 8 feet rear yard setback for a pool. The variance is the minimum necessary to allow for the construction of a pool. Our recommendation on the second variance. Approve the variance to section 28-391G1 to allow an encroachment of 1.5 feet in lieu of the required 5 feet required rear yard setback for a pool enclosure. Again, the variance is the minimum necessary to allow the construction of a pool. On the third recommendation, we recommend to deny the variance to section 28-391G2 to allow an encroachment of 1 foot 3 inches in lieu of the required 5 feet side yard setback for a detached accessory structure, in this case a shed. A permit is not required to install a detached accessory structure less than 120 square feet, Property owner is responsible for the proper placement of the shed within prescribed setbacks and outside of easements. The detached accessory structure can be reduced in size. So that was our analysis, and that's our recommendation. I'll try and answer any questions you have about this.
Do you have any knowledge of how long the shed has been in place?
I do not. We could not determine that because we don't require a permit for that.
Right. Have there been any complaints or anything from the neighbor to that side?
We've recently, in these past variances, been sending notices out to adjacent property owners, and with this case, we have not received any calls.
You've not received any?
Who maintains the back part, the drainage ditch?
The 50 feet.
The 50 feet? Is that the city? Do the owners, the property owners?
I got it.
Okay.
Concerned about the grass?
Ma'am, if you need to speak, we have to pull in the card.
Is it- We'll wait for you to answer that. Okay.
My understanding is that it's a city right-of-way. Now, I have been told, especially by the applicant, that there have been instances where the city, and I don't know when, I couldn't confirm this, that portions of it were given, not necessarily given outright to the adjacent property owners, but there were portions that could be allowed to be fenced. So in other words, you have, in this case, this particular property, behind it there may be a fence that they've built inside that right-of-way. But it's not, that portion of the property they built that fence is not owned by them. It's still owned by the city.
Well, I'm sure we have some questions about that place, and we'll wait and get the applicant's take on that. Are there any other questions of staff?
Yes.
Ma'am.
You mentioned that staff thought there was a better position of the shed to not encroach. What were staff's thoughts on that?
I refer you to the sketch that was provided by Mr. Gann on page 17, and that coupled with the survey. We thought that the shed could probably be shifted outside of that setback, so it wouldn't have to necessarily encroach in that setback, or if at all, maybe reduced in size. Right now, he's asking for a 1 foot, 3 inches encroachment. So it's possible he could reduce that just a little bit, and he could use an administrative waiver to setbacks that we have currently in the code of up to a foot. But I understand that's an expense. He's going to have to relocate that somehow or shift that fairly large shed a little bit in order to do that.
I have a quick question.
Staff, sure.
Did you know that there is a pipe underneath that property line, on the west property line? There is an 18-inch drainage pipe that goes to the ditch.
I'm not aware that there is a pipe underneath that drainage dish. I know that if the variances are approved tonight, Mr. Gandy still has to go through an easement vacate process. So what that means is he would have to submit an application to us and get approval and letters from all the relevant agencies, including any that might have responsibility for any kind of facilities that would be in that drainage utility easement.
That's one of the reasons it's this pipe is about 4 or 5 feet deep. So if the city staff is going to go in and actually do anything with that pipe, which is on the west property line, okay, and it connects to a pipe to a manhole inside the ditch. It's about that pipe inside the ditch is about 46.
Right here?
48 inches pipe, so it's like a huge pipe.
Hey, I'm sorry, did you say it's on the property line or
On the
out?
property line, right on the, it's actually, if you look at your aerial, you will see in the front, like on the west side of the aerial, you'll see a drainage inlet that goes all the way to, a drainage inlet, you'll see like a little blob, and then where, that's where the water gets into. And that goes across the street, of course, and then goes all the way down to the 50-foot ditch. Okay? So we can grant that variance for But the problem is there is an easement over it, and it becomes an issue to the city. And there is something needs to happen with the Public Works Department, so the clearance from the Public Works Department.
Just for the record, we've not received a formal application for the easement vacate. We've actually recommended that he hold off on those until he's actually gone through the variances, because it would be impossible for him to be able to go through a variance or to vacate any portions of these easements if he did not have the variances ahead of time. So that was our recommendation to the property owner.
Okay, this will be very difficult, for them to vacate. That's my thinking, for the city. For the city to vacate something like that would be difficult.
You're saying there's an underground pipe right here.
Yeah.
Just curious, Brad, is that the typical flow of events? In other words, if someone's asking to vacate an easement, that they have to have a variance prior?
In this case, it's just unique. He's trying to build something that both requires a variance because he's encroaching to an existing setback, but also that setback happens to be within a much larger easement. So he's going to be required to do both in order to do what he wants to do.
Oh, well,
Okay.
I didn't have this, so I didn't know about that.
Not too many people have.
It's over here on the other side, on the other street. This is what he, this is the property, there's the line, there's one over here that feed to this thing.
So this is the easement, it's this right
Well, there's a pipe under here
here? Okay.
that feeds this big pipe all across here. that feeds the
Brad?
feed.
Just one quick question. So basically on the shed, they're 3 inches over, pushing them into a variance request instead of an administrative action?
That's correct.
Brad, on this variance, this one is for the west property line, basically encroachment on that easement, right? Or no, not the encroachment on the easement is not mentioned. It's on the property line, right? To
Correct.
The property line. That's the setback from the property line,
Correct.
basically.
That's correct.
And it still has to go through some kind of approval through Public Works, right?
Yes, I do want to inform you, we did have, this all started with initially with an application that we received, Mr. Gandy, to vacate a portion of that rear public utility easement at the back of the property in order to allow the pool. And apparently I don't know I can't recall if he received all the letters or some of the letters from all the relevant agencies. Mm-hmm. And that triggered our curiosity. We started looking at this further and we realized he's going to need variances as well. And I can't recall if Public Works had a comment about this at all, but I'm certainly sure Mr. Gandy can probably answer that question as to whether he received a letter from them or not. Because we would have to have that in order to process a vacate anyway.
I mean, it's simple. In the back of the property, there's a 50-foot drainage easement that belongs to the city. That drainage easement, that 50 feet, that's city property. It's not, And the city maintains it, or they don't maintain it. I'm not sure. It looks like it's a drainage, some kind of a drainage ditch.
Pipe.
Right, that 50-foot right-of-way in the back is for stormwater.
Yeah,
Maintained by the city.
I'm good.
Are any more questions, staff, at this moment? Okay. Then we will open it up to the public. And our first card, please, ma'am.
John Gandy.
Mr. Gandy, would you come up and please give us your name and your address, please, sir?
My name is John Gandy. I'm 1630 North Eden Circle in
Yes, sir.
Titusville. In reference to the vacations, I have all the letters from all the departments on both of those that I needed. Approved by the city, two departments in the city, and AT&T, Bright House, all of them. I got all that before we got involved with this variance that I needed to do. I didn't apply for those because he told me I had to have the variance to be able to do that. This is part of a project that we started back when we built the room for my mother-in-law. Unfortunately, she's passed away since we did this. It was going to be an exercise pool basically for her to, exercise in because she had some arthritis problems and things of that nature. The shed has been on that location since 2008, just for your information. In addition to the shed being there, we've also had to put a grinder in the ground when we built the addition because we built it at the same height as the house, so there wasn't enough slope. So the bathroom that I built for that room had to have a sewer grinder in the ground to pump it out to where it needed to go in the front drainage line. I am aware of the pipe in the ground, and when I went to the people to get the letters, they looked at it and said there wouldn't be a problem. If there was a problem, they needed to do something with that pipe. So they granted me the letters that stated they had no problem with that. So, I mean, I've done all the homework for this project before I found out I had to get this. The shed has electricity hooked into it, which is furnishing for the grinder. So in order to move it would be quite an ordeal at this point. And the grinder's buried in the ground, right, where they said they needed it to be. So I wasn't aware that this was a problem. I didn't even know we had a setback on the side yard. Didn't even know I had a 7.5-foot easement until I did the survey for the whole project, and then it came to light. So I know it's not any excuse to not know the law, but everybody in my neighborhood has sheds that are not 5 feet away from their fence line. So nobody knew about it apparently. When they didn't have to get a permit, nobody realized that they were setting their sheds too close to the fence. So I'm not using that as an excuse, but I'm just saying it's pretty for 3 inches. I'm a little bit awed at being such a big deal. We're not trying to ask for something unusual. I didn't realize it was going to be a big issue for such a small pool, which my wife has the same issues that her mother, and as she gets older, she's going to need something like this. It's a fact. It's a fact, and so that's the reason we're doing it, basically. I'm hoping that you will see it our way, but law is a law, I guess.
The shed, is it on a slab or is it?
It is not on a slab. When they brought it in, they had big PVC rollers. Yeah. And they rolled it in and set it, and then fastened it to the ground with whatever it is they use to fasten.
So it's not a permanent structure
it's
such
not
as a slab?
It's not a permanent structure in the sense of the shed itself, but because we put the electric in it and things of that nature for the grinder, that kind of pretty much sets it in that location. I've looked into possibly moving the shed. It would cost me about $1,500 maybe, and then we'd have to do something with that grinder in the ground. So I don't know what the cost of that would be, but whatever it is,
Would you mind providing us a copy of those letters that you said you have? Or
They're
do you
all
have
right
extras or what?
They're all right here.
They're not extras.
They're not extras, but I mean, somebody can make copies of them if you want. Because these are...
Okay. We'll submit that into record. That way we can at least say we've seen them.
I'm sorry?
We'll wait just a moment to ask any more questions till our recording secretary returns, if you don't
Okay.
mind, sir. So-
We got the same picture that you had. We brought it ourselves. But I have some other pictures. I know. I won't.
Brad? I'm just curious about the access to the power poles and behind all of those homes in that area. I assume that's from the end of the street?
Gotta wait till they come
We,
back.
we we need to wait till our recording
Oh.
secretary returns, if you don't mind, sir.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm sorry.
You know, how many times did they land that thing? Because I heard a bunch of them.
Well, there's running a jet up and down the coast.
Yeah.
They weren't landing today or yesterday. It was just test runs and doing back and forth. What they're measuring,
But they just drop into the atmosphere
I don't
and
know
then
where
out
they are.
back out?
No, they're running straight line.
Yeah, they're pretty exciting roads.
All up down there. Daytona, the maps are all the way down to Melbourne.
I wouldn't know when we're attacked if that's.
When you see a flash.
If you see a flash, you don't have to worry about it because you're already dead. You know, the flash precedes the destruction.
Flash just means, uh-oh.
If you have time enough to even do that, it's pretty quick.
When they set off those mortars at 4th of July out of the old Ware Warbird
Mm-hmm.
Museum or whatever, it doesn't sound like fireworks. It sounds like you're being bombed. It's like, I don't want to get used to this.
They're big.
They run in to get them done.
Sheriff says it's scary.
What? Falling on the ground.
Okay. I had extra copies that I didn't know.
I'm sorry, we're just taking a moment to look these over.
Not a problem. Take as long as you need, sir.
You did a good job.
I've been working at this project for over a year. And every time they ask me they need something, I go out and I get it. And this last one was, I didn't even know I was supposed to get variances for this. I honestly didn't know I had a 6-foot easement on the back or on the side of the property for all the time I would live there until I got the survey done. And then they informed me about setbacks and all these other things, and I thought, well.
How long have you lived there, sir?
I've been there since 1999. My father's house, it's my father's house. I inherited it when he died. I remodeled the whole inside of it, and, you know, I put a lot of money in the home.
Yeah.
But when my wife's mother and we brought them down from Virginia, we hoped that they were going to live a while, but he died of cancer and she died. We really don't know what she died.
Don't make me cry.
I mean, she was supposed to come into that room. On the day that we were going to bring her in there, she got sick and went in the hospital and never came out.
Oh, sorry
She
to
never
hear that.
spent a single day in the room. And that's why it upsets her.
All right, now that we've had some more evidence presented, does someone else have any more questions of this applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one clarification I want to make to a question that Mr. Member Johnson made earlier. He asked me earlier about the administrative waiver process and whether it was really just a difference between 3 inches or not. I just want to clarify that, one, I was incorrect about the amount of that can be administratively waived. It's 10% or up to a foot. And so in this case, the 10% would really be about 6 inches is all we could administratively waive as far as the location and encroachment of that shed into the setback. That too said now, administrative waivers are not always guaranteed. Right. I mean, there is a process, it's separate. So it's not tied to whether he receives a variance from you or not. So I just want to make that clear.
Okay.
I'm sorry, and you did have another question. I just did want to.
My only question was the easement in the back of the property, access to the power poles.
Okay.
I'm assuming it's not in between your homes. It's
no. What happened there was I realized we were going to put a pool in, and the lines were going to go right across the top of where the pool was going to go. So I went to Florida Power and Light, and I had them. Well, actually, I had to do the digging and the putting in the pipes in the ground and all that stuff. And then we ran the electrician underground. All the electricity to this house runs off the power pole that's in the back, approximately 5 or 6 feet from my property line. All the lines are running out that way. Okay. And so I put the cable lines, I put the phone lines, and I put the power lines in the ground in 3 separate pipes that come up to the west side of the house where they put the new meter when we did that. So, again, I've been working at this thing for a long time. And
So your power line, the power line is not directly on your property, it is 5 foot back from the end of your property?
The pole that the transporter sits on is approximately 5 to 6 feet from the back of my property, in that 50-foot easement that they have there.
Okay.
And so it runs east and west. So when we decided to do this pool, I went ahead and got the piping from Florida Power and Light, and when we built the room, I had the people that were doing the excavation for the slab to dig the hole. Mm-hmm. And it turns out he has done that. I mean, he was certified to do that. So I had him dig the hole, and we made sure the pipes were 3 feet in the ground. So there's no possible way we're going to have a problem with electrical in regard to the pool.
All right.
So,
thank you. Any other questions for the applicant?
You asked a question, who's maintaining the lot back there?
Yes, sir.
What happened, what he was referring to is when they changed over from having an open ditch to putting the culvert in.
Okay, they did put a culvert in.
They put a culvert in before I got to the property. But my father had a letter from the city stating that if you wanted to move your fence, not a structure of anything, but a fence, out 17 feet from where your property line is, you could do that. You maintain that and maintain it. So 3 of the property owners in this subdivision have moved their fences out. One of them moved his out 17 feet. I moved mine out 12 feet. The reason being that you're going at a slope, and out further than that is pretty much a marsh all the time. Well, the city comes in with a big tractor, like a farm tractor that you would pull work on a farm with, to cut that grass. Well, they put there's a sewer station three houses over back on the other side of that 50-foot ditch, and it failed. We thought we were smelling rotting grass and all that stuff, but what was happening was dumping sewer out into that space. So they had to build a road on the other half of that 50, the 25 foot on that side. They put in marl and built a road, and the grass has kind of grown over it now. You don't really see it. But so they could drive down there and work on that station. So all the water, there's 2 grates in there, and when the water, when you get a good rain, those grates, all the water in the whole subdivision goes down that tube out to wherever it disperses. And there's 2 grates there. When you get a lot of rain coming down fast, those grates act like geysers, and water shoots up, and it fills up that area like a lake for a minute or 2. And then as soon as it stops raining, it all drains out and goes away. But since they put that road in there, all the water comes towards us. And I've talked to him about that, and I've talked to another person that was in his department. So when I build this, I'm going to build it up a little bit so that we don't get the water coming all the way to the back edge of my house every time it rains like that. That's part of the deal that we're doing here. I will not go outside of my property with that, but it'll be along the property line that I do that to keep the water from encroaching like it does, because otherwise it'll fill my pool up.
That would be good.
You know?
Mr. Gandy and I did have conversations with Steve Adams, the building official, one of the building officials, about, and I know he asked some questions about that. So it'll be a separate permit process and having to deal with that kind of stuff, separate from this variance.
Right.
It's not part of this, but
No,
I'm
not
just
part of
giving
this.
you information.
It all ties into the big picture, though.
That's what we intend to have happen.
All right.
Hopefully it works out. Is there any more questions?
I don't see any more questions. Thank you very much, sir.
Have a good day.
Is the other person have an application in, or just Tim?
Yes, sir, that's all.
Okay. All right, then we will close the public hearing at this time and bring it back to the commission. And are there any further questions of staff or clarifications?
There's one question that I had. The idea that there's water coming out from these inlets, right? And that leads to just the city system might use this ditch as part of an overflow so that the water gets into it and then goes out. And it doesn't last too long, right? So it really doesn't last too long. So this is something that if the Public Works Department is okay with it, we have no issues, because that's their responsibility, and they maintain it. But more encroachment into that ditch causes some problems, in the future. The more you encroach into it, the less storage you have in that ditch. And all of a sudden, it becomes a problem for everybody.
Nobody has encroached.
So you're going to see the end of it.
No, nobody is encroaching like the city encroached on the other side. They're not doing that. What I'm saying is that the water comes up, and it only happens in a really, really strong rain that lasts 30 minutes or so. And then you'll see that happening.
And it disappears after.
And it dissipates within 5 minutes after it stops raining. All the water goes down the tube. It's not a big thing. But one night when we had one of those big storms, I guess it was a hurricane or something was coming through, the water came up all the way to the back of the new room that we had built. It was 23 inches up the fence. Because next morning I measured where the leaves ended up. It was 23 inches. So, I mean, it wasn't a problem until they put the road in. When they took the road in, they took half of that ditch that the water could go in, and now
it's blocked.
It's a little bit of an issue.
Normally, you don't see that except in the big storm events anyway.
Right. It has to be a lot of water and a lot of space.
All right.
I didn't show you this before, but if you let me, I'll show you pictures of the grinder and where it's located and stuff like that if you want to see it.
I don't think that's necessary, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. I didn't, I wanted you to be aware I'm not making things
you're
up.
well prepared. We see that, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much again. All right. Still no other questions for staff? All right. If that's the case, do we have any comments, or are we ready for somebody to make a motion? There'll be 3 different items
That's correct.
to bring forth, right? All right.
I'll make the first motion. Sorry?
Microphone.
I make the first motion. Let me put my glasses on.
Yes. Thank you. If I can find the motion pages. Too many pages. There it is. There it is. Number
I make a motion to approve the first variance, 20. This is variance number 7-2017, and for, let's see.
section. It's on page 3 of 3.
This is, what is it?
Come on over.
Okay.
Here's section that.
Various to section 28-391 to allow an encroachment of 2.5 feet in lieu of the required 8 feet rear yard setback for a pool. The variance is the minimum necessary to allow for the construction of the pool. And that's based on the information that we received today.
Okay, we have a motion,
Second.
and we have a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, may we have roll call, please?
Chairman Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shahaya,
Yes.
Member Hunley,
Yes.
Member Johnson,
Yes.
Alternate Member Smith Rodriguez.
Yes.
Very good. Now we'll move on to the second variance section.
I make a motion to approve the variance to section 28-391G1 to allow an encroachment of 1.5 feet in lieu of the required 5 feet rear yard setback for a pool enclosure.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? May I have roll call, please?
Vice Chairman Shahayam?
Yes.
Member Hunley?
Yes.
Member Johnson?
Yes.
Alternate Member Smith Rodriguez?
Yes.
Chairman Taylor?
Yes. And finally, we have the final section. Do I have a motion on that?
I'll make another motion. This is based on the Public Works letter that there is no problem with the vacation or of that easement. There won't be any encroachment, not encroachment, but there won't be any problem for Public Works with that easement. And I move to approve the variance to section 28-391G2 to allow an encroachment of 1 foot to 3 inches in lieu of the required 5 feet side yard setback for a detached accessory structure.
Which is a shed.
No, second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion?
I have one comment I want to make about that motion.
Very good, sir.
I just want to ask one question, if possible, about you are basing your motion on the letter that was provided by the applicant from Public Works. Does the letter from Public Works specifically address the rear yard drainage easement, or is it the side yard drainage easement, or is it the rear yard public utility easement?
Side yard. It's 7.5 feet side yard easement.
Okay. That letter I have not seen. So
That's part of the letters that he showed us already.
right. Okay. So that's to your satisfaction. That's something we have not received in our records have reviewed before. So okay.
Okay, it's now in our record, but
Okay.
yeah.
Well, it's still understood, even if he passes here, like you said, he'll still have to come through another process, and the applicant's aware of that.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I've had a motion and a second. Any more discussion? May we have a vote, please?
Member Hunley?
Yes.
Member Johnson?
Yes.
Alternate Member Smith Rodriguez?
No.
Chairman Taylor?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Shahayam?
Yes.
Very well, the motion passes. All right, congratulations. We have that.
Before we move on, Ms. Rodriguez, could you state your basis for voting no on the last motion?
I do not believe it is the minimum variance required.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll move on to our next item on the agenda is, petitions and requests from the public present, and unless you have something else to say? No, I'm happy. Okay, you're happy. All right, we have no reports from the public. Reports, we have our semi-annual report to go over. Yes, please.
This is rather a formality since we missed the last meeting. We've already submitted this to the City Council, but it's your semi-annual report, so if you accept it, if you want to make any amendments, we can certainly do that and give it to the City Council.
Well, I was fine with it.
Okay.
Well, do we need to have a formal vote on it, or just,
I want to know.
No,
if
it's
you
not
were Mayor
necessary.
Gaines.
City Council.
I'm sorry?
Were you Mayor
It's not
Gaines' son?
necessary.
Not necessary, okay.
Mary's your sister?
Say again?
Mary's your sister? Will you give her my card?
Come on now.
She's in another state, you know that, right?
No, I mean, I haven't talked to her in 20 years.
might take her a while to contact
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, so we don't have to vote on this because it's already been submitted to City Council. Just looking at, anybody have any
Brad,
thing to
it
bring
has
up on
not
that?
been submitted yet.
Oh,
It goes,
Thank you for
because it
correcting.
has to be approved by the board before it can go. So because we didn't have a meeting, it had to be moved to this meeting, and it will go to council the first meeting in September.
Thank you. My being a very assuming.
we have a correction. So
Okay. Thank you.
does anyone have any objection to any of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items being sent on to the City Council?
No.
Seeing no objection, we'll say passes and send on.
Yes.
Don't need a formal vote, do we?
You can do a consensus vote.
All right, well, everyone in favor of that, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Any opposed? Very good. We met that. Good to know. All right. It says adjournment, but we're supposed to ask if there are any reports. Staff, you have anything to enlighten us on?
I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, so you said at this point that, well, it's past the deadline, so there's no applications for next month.
I will have to check. I'm not the only person that receives applications.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but I have not been informed of any additional applications
All right.
yet.
Council, we have anything to report?
No update, thank you.
Okay. As far as from me, we are still short 2 members to this board. If anybody in the public is listening, we need desperately a full-time member, which has to meet certain requirements of the city. And then we have an alternate position available that is open to anyone, if I'm not mistaken. So if you would like to make an application, please do so. We do at times need the extra people. Do I have any members' reports? Seeing none, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.